Bienvenidos a Colombia Antigua. La historia es para compartirla sin egoísmo. Es por eso que cada video tiene el enlace y la información de dónde fue descargado. Esperamos que los videos y la información sean útiles para usted.
The Republic of Colombia, the nearest country on mainland South America to the troubled Central American region. Colombia has the distinction of being one of the few Latin American countries with a Western-style parliamentary system. That system is now being put to the test at two levels: National Congress elections on March 14th and presidential elections on May 30th. Presidential candidates include the Liberal Party's Dr. Alfonso Lopez Michelson. He was previously elected president back in 1974, following a curious 16-year period of alternate power sharing between the liberals and conservatives. The power sharing idea was a way of ending rivalry between the two main parties, rivalry so bitter it led to civil war. That's difficult to imagine in present-day Colombia, which has more social and economic stability than most of its neighbors. But the years 1948 to 1957 threatened to tear the country apart. It wasn't military dictatorship against the exploited masses, but Liberal Party against the Conservative Party, a struggle for power that led to thousands of deaths. The memory of civil war, power sharing, and allegations of corruption left the majority of voters apathetic in the last two elections. There is also the suspicion that corruption in high places has increased in recent years due to huge private fortunes made from the illegal trade in drugs. These are mainly cocaine and marijuana channeled to the North American market. A powerful drugs mafia does exist, but it's impossible to say how far it controls the politicians. Officially, the main parties are committed to stamp out the drugs traffic. Subversion is a more tangible problem. These arms are not part of the national armory. They're guerrilla weapons seized recently by the armed forces. Late last year, in the run-up to the elections, the Army launched a big drive against guerrilla strongholds in the south and west of the country. Thanks perhaps to the democratic tradition in Colombia, the government has not launched a full-scale war against its left-wing guerrilla dissidents. Instead, it has been calling on them to surrender under an amnesty offer. The main guerrilla group, M19, carried out its most spectacular operation in 1980 when it seized the Dominican embassy in Bogotá and held hostage an army of foreign diplomats. These included the Papal Nuncio, the United States ambassador, the envoys of Switzerland, Egypt, Israel, and 8 heads of mission from Latin American countries. The guerrillas were demanding the release of colleagues from jail and a ransom of $50 million. The siege dragged on as the government ruled out any attempt to take the embassy by storm, but also refused flatly to release any of its prisoners. The government, invoking the tradition of democracy, insisted that freeing prisoners would be contrary to the Constitution. The stalemate was to drag on for exactly 2 months. At last, a compromise was reached. The demands had been reduced to the payment of a ransom and a promise from the government that the trials and detentions of leftists in Colombian jails would be monitored by the Organization of American States. The guerrillas were driven to Bogotá Airport and were allowed to fly off to Cuba and exile. The Bogotá International Airport was the scene of another dramatic exploit in February this year by the M19 movement. Guerrillas hijacked a Boeing 727 belonging to the Colombian Aerotal airline with 128 people aboard and forced the pilot to fly west to the city of Cali. This time, the operation seemed to be aimed only at publicity for the guerrillas, who want to break what they see as a stranglehold of power by the old political parties. The government's drive against its political opponents brought a visit to outgoing President Turbay Ayala in 1980 by officials of Amnesty International. Amnesty was examining the human rights issue in Colombia, in particular charges that suspected leftist guerrillas were being subjected to systematic torture. The position of the prisoners has not been helped by the continuing state of siege, which means certain constitutional guarantees against arbitrary arrest are suspended. The issue of human rights was taken up by demonstrators in November 1981. The rally was organized by Colombia's Trade Union Confederation and attracted a wide cross-section of the population. Besides demands for the release of all political prisoners, there were protests against the education system, unemployment, rising inflation, and the alleged repression of Indians and peasants. Economic and social grievances then, but at least the voices are allowed to be raised. No government facing elections can afford to appear to be an enemy of free speech. Colombia is perhaps best known for its coffee. After Brazil, it is the world's biggest producer. Coffee has consistently provided Colombia with about 2/3 of its export earnings and has given the country a sound economic base. But world prices have slipped, last year by about 1/5, pushing the trade balance into the red. So the government aims to diversify its economy by developing the nickel, coal, oil, and gas industries. Cheap labor for the coffee industry comes from Colombia's South American Indians, who are right at the bottom of the social and economic scale. At last, though, they have begun to organize themselves politically. On February 24th this year, thousands of Colombian Indians gathered in the town of Bosa, outside the capital, for the first ever Colombian Indian Congress. They want basic human rights, and they are a new pressure group on Colombia's political stage. Rights for Indians will only be one of the minor issues in the elections, though, at least as far as the two major political parties, the conservatives and liberals, are concerned. The main slogan of the liberal presidential candidate, Alfonso López Michelson, is "López, the Peace President." He is running a law and order campaign determined to meet the threat of the leftist guerrilla movements. He also speaks out for more federalism, giving more administrative power to the provinces. He promises health and education programs for the masses and a lowering of interest rates to help the financial sector. Former President López has the advantage of being backed by the might of the established Liberal Party, which has been in power for the last 8 years. But not all liberals will vote for him. A new liberalism movement, represented by Luis Carlos Galán Sarmiento, will split the liberal vote this year. The Galán supporters say López has already had his chance as leader. Now it's time for a new face and for new liberal policies. Galán, at the age of 38, is comparatively young, but he has past experience as an ambassador, a senator, and education minister. He enjoys the support of all liberals who oppose López, who has been accused of incompetence and corruption when last in office. Galan campaigns for the raising of the state of siege, the protection of natural resources from multinational companies, equal rights for women, and social programs to help the Indians, the old, and the unemployed. The National Movement is a strong grouping which supports the presidential candidate of the Conservative Party, Belisario Betancourt Cuartas. He is also a former ambassador and government minister, and he is standing for the presidency for the 5th time. Betancourt is a solid party man and enjoys the full support of the conservative right wing. He is considered to have a good chance of being elected president, especially since the liberal vote will be split between Lopez and Galan. Betancourt says the armed forces must have wider powers to fight against revolutionary violence, and he enjoys strong middle-class support. The radical left is represented by Gerardo Molina, whose Democratic Unity group includes the Communist Party. He is a respected opposition leader, but has no chance of becoming president. Betancourt and Lopez are the front-runners. But a large turnout of voters could see the smaller parties having more success this time and revive popular interest in the democratic process. There's one candidate in these elections who stands apart from all the others. Politically, she is a comparative beginner and has no chance at all of topping the poll. But she is such an extraordinary character, we thought it worthwhile to take a closer look at her highly colorful lifestyle. She calls herself Regina the 11th. A typical afternoon at Regina's Center in Bogota. People come here in their hundreds every day, but not for politics. What's happening here has nothing to do with the raising of taxes or the making of foreign policy. These people have come here to be cured. It could be from physical pain or mental stress or simply bad luck. Whatever the problem, these people believe that Regina has the power to help them and that she has passed on that power to her disciples who work on her behalf. The mother of this little girl claims her child was near death 6 months earlier with a heart condition, and it was curing her own child of a heart problem that first set Regina off on her career as a healer. Regina calls herself the Queen Mother of Colombia, and for her followers, that's exactly what she is. They give her money and gifts, although many of them, probably most of them, are poor. Other politicians have to cultivate voters with free dinners, free rides to the polling booth, and so on. Regina gets money flowing the other way. Once on the stage, Colombia's Queen Mother becomes more queen than mother. She rules by the sheer force of her personality, guiding, calming, controlling. What politician wouldn't give his eye teeth for power like this? Regina's critics, and there are many of them, claim she is at best a manipulator, at worst a fraud. She sees herself as a source of energy, a healer. She wants to advance the cause of women too, but apart from that, she is difficult to fit into the normal political classifications.
¿Cuántos de ustedes hoy se pueden curar? Porque vamos a filmar las curaciones de hoy, ¿no? Entonces voy a pasar por aquí.
Adulation of Regina reaches its peak in these nude statues of herself. Believers touch the parts where they themselves are suffering in the hope of being cured. Regina claims to be a Roman Catholic, but the church frowns on scenes like this. A few years ago, she even faced excommunication after a near riot in Bogota Cathedral, where she was taking part in a mass on her birthday. This center in Bogota is only one of 30 around the country. There's also a major center in Florida, USA, where she now lives. Money from her supporters has made Regina big business. She has a whole string of companies, including a thriving computer business, which is so efficient it's won some of the biggest ever contracts from the government. Some people see the money-spinning activities of this extraordinary woman as just more evidence that she is a manipulator, not a saint. Regina, they say, may well be dedicated to wiping out poverty, but for herself, not for the masses. There is no disputing the fact that Regina does have charisma, an energy flow that seems to communicate itself to people immediately, often without words. But there are times when it's difficult to take her at her own estimation. She claims, for example, that she has often achieved levitation, though she has never been filmed floating in the air. Another test of her followers' faith. At this gathering in downtown Bogota, she claimed she could stop the rain. She couldn't. Regina has since declared that she will do no more predictions, though she insists she can see into the future. Those who defend Regina say that nobody tells the Colombian people more lies than the politicians. And if there is anybody in this year's elections who is guilty of being a charlatan, if there is anybody promising more than they can deliver, it won't be Regina alone.
Déjenla pasar.